Okay, we're live. Here we are. Let's see, it's Thursday. It's noon Eastern. What's happening? All right, it's another episode of Untangled. Thanks everyone in LinkedIn land. And for those of you listening and tuning in later, I'm Jen Frazier. I am your host of Untangled. I'm also my day job, I'm the CEO of Firefly Partners. We're a digital agency working with nonprofits and folks in the social sector since way back in really what feels like the Stone Ages now. Almost 20 years. I'm very excited to celebrate 20 years next year. We're here in Untangled, which is a space we created to talk to folks in the social sector, looking at the intersection of technology and social good, which is very active right now with sort of the advent of the sort of rush of AI tools and AI innovation in the space. And that's kind of where we've been focusing our energy. I call them seasons now of Untangled, this season. And we're here today with Abby Lupi, who is research manager at careervillage.org. Abby, thank you so much for being here today and joining me on Untangled.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yay! Abby and I met at the Good Tech Summit, maybe just, what was that? A few weeks ago, 3 weeks
A few weeks
ago? I don't
ago.
know. It's like I've lost track of time. And it was great. I mean, it's one of those moments where you're sitting at the table next to somebody and then you start talking and you're like, you're rad. And then like, you should be on my show. You have lots of amazing things going on, both at your organization and just more generally the way you're approaching AI and the tools. So first off, I'd love for you to just tell folks a little bit about your background, and then we can talk a little bit about what's going on at Career Village, and then we're going to get into some bigger, meatier topics. So let's dive in. Maybe start with your background and then what's going on at Career Village. Be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me today. I'm Abby. I am the research manager at careervillage.org, and Career Village is a global tech nonprofit that has existed since 2011. Our mission is to democratize access to underserved people, making sure everybody has really quality career advice and guidance, leading to really strong economic outcomes and building economic mobility. So
Yay.
yeah, great stuff. We do this through two main products. One is our careervillage.org website. It's kind of a Reddit for career advice. We have
Nice.
a massive network of over 200,000 professionals who will answer questions about any career.
Nice.
And then on the other side, we also have a AI career coach tool that we use in tandem with workforce training programs and higher education to support and expand the career services capacity. So the big focus of probably our conversation today, and Jim more generally, is probably the AI coach and how we're really navigating that integration in the long-standing education and workforce systems, especially in the US.
Yeah. I mean, that's all like a big lot of things. I was like, wow, that was I'm good.
There's a
Even when
lot.
we started talking at the summit, I was like, wow. And of course, I will just out myself as saying I didn't know about you all. So I was super excited to learn and then be a promoter of the services of the Career Village anyway. And just sort of was like, oh, this is something people should know about if they don't know about it. I know a lot of people want to work in the sector and then they kind of either feel like they get a little bit pigeonholed or something into a role, but they're like, I would like to maybe pivot and do something
Hmm.
different or whatever. All those kinds of things that happen in a career path, maybe sometimes know the right way to ask those questions or get more resources or do more trainings that can help an individual move through a career path more effectively. So I think that like there's so much there that's so awesome because if you don't have great mentors sometimes at your org or just in your network, you're kind of like, you feel like you get kind of stuck and you just go, well, I'll just take the next development associate job. And you try to maybe make some, organic steps forward, but then you're like, ooh, there's opportunities to look and see what else is going on and who else might have advice or just different resources available to you than you would have
Yeah.
had in your network. So awesome. Love it. Love to promote that. So we'll put that in the blog and in the LI posts and everything after just to help promote the work y'all doing there. So I know you said something about like some of those tools, or we could talk a little bit about how AI has maybe changed that work before we get into the bigger topics. Just briefly, if you want to touch on that in any way, that would be great. And then we can kind of get into the main topic.
Yeah. And when you say how AI has touched like personal workflows or
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
That stuff at Career Village, basically, right now,
Yeah.
like the work, since around 2011, the work
Yeah.
and the ways in which you're providing that have been obviously impacted by the availability of the tools. Just even like a
Yeah.
snippet of like, oh, what's changed now that like in the resources that are available, the way you're curating and collecting information, the way you're making it available
Yeah.
for people, and all of that.
Well, something I'm very, very proud to say is that our human-centered focus has not changed.
Yay.
So, yes, we love to hear it. Our question and answer platform is still going strong. We have
Yeah.
regular volunteering events where we'll like crowdsource answers from people who are in a particular company or sector to get questions answered and hosting advice-a-thons and things like that. So the human connection and like connecting people to real people is very present. That also leads over into our work with Coach.
Mhm.
So Coach was really trying to figure out as AI, generative AI became really emerged as this general purpose chatbot type thing.
Mhm.
And, we're in the business of providing guidance and answering questions.
Right.
We're okay, to what extent can this technology help us further our mission? And to what extent does it hinder that, right? Like
Yeah.
what are the limitations of it?
Hmm.
So, want to say 2 or so years ago, we went all in to figure out how we can navigate this and beat this moment. And what we found is that there are some very, very exciting, incredible use cases for this kind of technology, provided that the technology itself is not the central focus of
Right.
the social impact. So this will probably get into more, but right, what you really want to avoid is AI technologies as a solution in search of a problem. So we start
Yes.
with the problem, right? The theory of change, fundamentally, what are we trying to solve? What are we trying to provide, support, build? And then the second question coming after that is, does this tool fit into our theory of change? Why or why not?
Hmm. I love that. That's so huge. That's exactly the framing that I have been really trying to hammer home in my conversations. The way I'm communicating about this stuff into the world is I don't like when people just have basic questions, it's a giant pet peeve of mine right now. When they're like, well, just ask ChatGPT, I'm like, please don't. Like, certain things and whatever, use your own brain if you can. Then, whatever, crowdsource. But then also, like, search engines still exist and they are a lot less resource intensive out in the world than you don't everything. And I know that now search is all very AI embedded, but there is still like just, we used Google for many years and it helped answer basic questions. You can still use it. It is still kind of pulling more AI in, but I actually have been on this little conversation recently about like, and everyone's like, oh, AI is 10 times more, resource intensive or whatever than a basic
Mm,
search and all these types of things. And yes and no, and it's always nuanced, but mostly it's this like the idea that you have to lean on these tools now for everything is sort of also
yeah,
a knee jerk reaction that I'm like, no. And we'll get into this, but sort of the idea of like the ways in which you use it most wisely, I guess, and most effectively, most responsibly. We're going to talk
yeah,
in a couple of weeks just about responsible use of AI. It's also got a lot of this built into it, which is a little bit of some of the stuff that we're going to talk about, but it's like trying to find ways in which you're like, I'm already doing something and I've already got some workflows, I've already got some stuff like thought through and I'm hitting some ceilings and maybe there's a use case in here where accessing some of
yeah,
these more powerful tools could help get through a block or help bring in additional information that we weren't able to get to before or some of these types of scenarios that are just very different than like, oh, I'm thinking what's going on this weekend. in my local area or
Hmm.
something, whatever. You're like,
And
that's
it
not a
really
great
comes
use
down
case.
to, yeah, and I would say that it comes down to the layer of intentionality that you put
Yeah.
behind it. And when presented with something that is so new and exciting and is advertised as being the one size fits all
Yeah.
solution to any problem, right? Any question you have, it's very easy to fall into that
Use
dependence,
this.
that
Yeah.
perfect, then I can use it for anything. Um, so I think and something that I really want to uh, make sure I touch on too is that nobody has it figured out. So even I work with this stuff day in and day out, and every day I'm confronted with questions of, is this the best use of my time?
Mm-hmm.
How do I want to use generative AI in this capacity? Do I want to use this model or this provider?
Mm-hmm.
When is it really important to sustain that like initial brainstorming or like sound judgment? And then when is it important to supplement or build off of it in a new capacity with this thing, right? These are
Yeah.
research questions we don't have the answer to because everything
Right.
just happened and everything's changing really fast. So
Yeah.
if you don't
We are
know,
figuring out. Yeah. As we walk,
we're
it's like,
figuring
oh,
everything out as we go. We are all in exploration mode. So if you're entering the AI space and you're like, wow, I don't know what's going on, you are not alone. You are in very good company.
very good company. Welcome. We all don't know
Welcome.
what's going on, and we're all figuring it out as we get here, which is one of the beauties of this space. But so, like, when we were then said, "Hey, great, I want to have you come on the show," I initially thought, "Oh, we'll talk a lot about what you're doing at your, day job and all that kind of stuff." But we, got into some meatier topics, and the title of today's conversation is "Impact Happens at the Speed of Trust," which I would love to just unpack that a little bit. And that was a title you came up with. And I'd love to have you just talk about where that came from and what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So the speed of trust is not my thing. It's
Sure.
uh traces back to read that book, kind of really just illustrating that everything happens at the speed of trust. And the point of that phrasing is to suggest that forward movement in pretty much any space can't happen effectively without bringing people along with you.
Mm-hmm.
And and so I kind of liken that thought process to my work in impact evaluation and measurement for Coach. What we observe time and time again, as any, humanities major or scholar will tell you, is that if you don't build a foundational level of trust with the people who are involved in the processes, right? So thinking about the point of contact for the workforce program, who then communicates with their educators who are facilitating the career services program for their learners, right? Everything that we do in social impact space leans on this complex network of interpersonal relationships. And if we're not navigating that effectively and compassionately, then the ultimate impact that we hope to see of our service is not going to survive.
Right.
So um, I think about impact happens at the speed of trust in the context of so deeply, deeply human
Mm.
and so at odds sometimes with the very analytical, numerical, data driven, right,
Right.
side of things. Because we
Exactly.
want to prove things, we want to demonstrate things, we want to use the scientific process and
Mm-hmm.
try to make generalizable claims and have a really strong validity. But at the end of the day, a social impact is not something that is like a one or a zero, right? It's a human person. So
Totally.
how do we measure that? And so that's sort of the tension that you sit with when you're a researcher in this space.
That was really, really well put. I think it helped sort of name what I'm hearing lots of folks who are in the social impact space grapple with around sort of just, and it's not a new conversation, obviously, the interplay between those folks doing the very human elements of this work, which is the crux of it. It's very relational, it's very care centered, it's very much like community based, it's person to person interaction. It is, it's very like, let's bring us all forward. Let's, like, the humanness is so rich in the social sector and the social, like, good impact, all these spaces. And you're like, how do I think about the technology, which feels very cold and impersonal, and it's data driven, and all these other pieces which feel just inherently at odds, and like kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum of the humanness of most of the work that happens in this space. And you're like, but wait, these tools, which in and of itself, are, yes, zeros and ones. Let's just be clear. Like, that's literally what's happening. And then the ways in which sort of the humans around this sort of technology have personalized the experience too, for people to be interacting with the data and the tools in a way to help sort of, I don't mask whatever, but yeah, humanize and personalize what are essentially just these very analytical, numerical, data driven, blah 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 things that are happening. It's all predictive, word placement, tokens, all these things. And when you break it down, yes. But it's sort of like, then you go, and also we layer on the complexity of who's in charge of how that got translated and humanized is sort of one of the bigger pieces that we're grappling with, and sort of the ways in which, again, since we've been doing this, what tools we use, who created those tools, how we use them then, and then how that impacts the human and interplays with the human parts of what we're doing in the social sector. So there's like a lot of complex things going on. And I knew that some people, we've interacted with many that just are sort of on the like, no, I don't want to play. I don't like what these folks are doing. I don't like a lot of the biases, the environmental impact, like all the objections. And obviously this is a very different scale, but I think it's a lot of the same questions we've been grappling with around, I've been going to like Web of Change, and these groups have been happening since the early 2000s around this interplay of technology in the social sector. And now I think this is just like, okay, it's kind of gone hyperdrive a little bit. They're like, whoa, okay, this is like big. So, but I have subscribed, and I think you obviously do, is like, there's a ways in which we can't opt out. And so we have to use it in more of a responsible, thoughtful way. And so some of this like interplay there, I'd love to like dig into a little bit about some things that you personally are bringing into the work that you do, and just topics and ways to help our audience think about some of these issues in ways that like get out of a binary like yes, no, like I can use it or I can't, and it's way more nuanced than that. So maybe on that, like what are some of the ways in which you've been sort of grappling with some of they're big topics, but like
big topics, and I just want to echo what you said earlier about a lot of these questions are long-standing questions that are just blown up in proportion, right, in the past few years. They're not new questions, but they are increasingly in front of our faces all the time. And as an artist myself, right, I'm very familiar with not only, well, the myriad of ethical concerns and debates around AI, but also the particular use of generative AI within artwork. And that, right, we could have a whole other podcast about that.
Yeah.
But because of that, the different communities that I sit in, right, the local Rochester community, artists, technologists, researchers, academia, everyone, education, right, like everybody is coming from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And when everyone thinks about generative AI, they're probably thinking about something slightly different and what it actually means to them. And, by and large, when people think about AI, especially in a negative light, they're thinking about the worst parts of it, the worst uses of it, right? And the reason that I'm in this space, in the social sector, is because I believe that everyone deserves a seat at the table to making the decisions that are going to have a massive impact on our lives. I think that people a variety of opinions and criticisms about all the technology is
Yeah.
very important.
Yeah.
But the one that I'm most passionate about is by engaging within the systems that do exist to understand if this technology is emergent, very funded, very
Mhm.
powerful, how can we, as a part of that system, use it to maximize the social good that can be done?
Percent. I think that's literally where I'm sitting as well. It's sort of the I think even when you said at the beginning the democratization of access and things like this about I was like that's what I've been saying for the last at least year, 18 months is sort of like you get into the like, oh my God, it's super cool. And then you're kind of like, whoa, okay, now you get that's kind of my big clarion call right now for everybody is why I'm like, please put AI adoption money in your budget for next year. Anyone listening, please, because it's not just about great, I'm getting an efficiency and I'm gonna, whatever, like some workflows are gonna happen. It is like a mind shift. And it also is sort of like get
It is.
in to that space and then figure out to your point, there's several layers there. It helps just reframe things for folks. This whole idea about adoption and trust is a big one that I don't want to lose about like what does it take to actually make effective change happen at scale
Hmm.
requires this like a level of trust which we desperately need more folks from our perspective in the social sector to be in those rooms trying to help make decisions around what is happening at the scale level. Like
Hmm.
this is not a time to sort of like take your values and be like, I'm going to sit over here on my high horse, like off on my own, planet. It's like, no, these are the big decisions that are getting made.
Yeah.
Time to educate and help people understand. We always have choices to make. We always have like power in the choices we make every single day. And if you're not in it and helping guide with your economic power, where you put your money, which tools you are buying and supporting, who you're building collaborations and community with to
Hmm.
help make a difference in what can be built, we lose power in these
I
spaces.
I would agree, and I would even argue that if you have a strong opinion and you are finding yourself increasingly isolated from the conversations where these decisions are being made, things are being happening, you're shrinking your own power,
Yeah.
right? So if you feel very strongly about responsible use or minimizing use or opt-out protections,
Hmm.
let's build that pathway
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
That's the through line for all of my research right now is how can we
Yeah.
actually build the trust and the systems and the collaborations required to effectively navigate this moment in a time where things are very uncertain, to put it mildly.
Yes. I think that's the other thing. I think they're like I'm a huge fan. Like we work with the change agent people. Like it's like a tool built by and
Yeah.
for the sector, which I'm like, yes. And they're like completely it's not even David and Goliath. It's like I don't even know the right comparison. I mean, it's like so the scale of money that is available and being funded into these big tools is absurd. Absurd. And
Yeah.
so then there's a lot of folks who even at that even at that Good Tech Summit, there was like, well, how can you guys compete? And you're like, this isn't a question even of like competing, but I mean, it is at the end of the day. Or are we going to not be at the latest edge of the greatest innovations and things like that if we're not all jumping into the big tools again?
Mm,
Like you have, it's like all these balances of like, okay, but what are you giving up when you just
yeah.
take what's available, easy, blah, 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 already funded, all these things that again is being shaped by people that don't share your values. It's,
Mm,
the equivalent right now of being like, if you could go back in time, would you not buy Salesforce for your organization because of the values of the leadership? Would you be like, now I feel like I'm kind of stuck though? Well,
mm,
right now you're not stuck into any of these tools yet. There are options, there are different avenues. And if we collectively as a sector said, we're going to not use the big ones, we collectively have a ton of power to
oh
say,
yeah.
I don't want to use those because they don't represent my values.
Yeah.
It's so hard to think about trying to make this the change at the scale that we need to, but I'm like, people, this is not set in stone yet. Like you haven't got years of
Yes.
investment in one of these big platforms yet, or maybe you do, but there are migration paths. We can make conscious choice around a
Yeah.
tool that has values that we trust. Back to the, the trust theme. So I'm always like, don't
Yeah.
be fooled into these arguments of like, but we're not going to be on the cutting edge. I'm like, I'm sorry, I love you nonprofits, but what are you doing that's so like needs to be on the bleeding edge of anything? It's like, come on, like we just need to adopt and think about again. It's the back to your question of like, is the AI tool though going to solve all these magical problems for you too?
Mm,
Like, what are you actually trying to do with them that requires you to be
yeah.
at the bleeding edge of whatever innovation is happening, and whatever happens in the big ones, these big breakthroughs will sweep through, the other use cases, and we all learn from each other in this space right now. So you don't
Yeah.
have to be on there. So anyway, keep going. You can respond.
But yeah, no, and I think a lot of what you're saying here, it reminds me of a lot of conversations I've had, even just, people in my community,
Sure.
the, you know, combination of just the sort of global catastrophe that we're living through right now is already bringing up,
Let's layer that on.
there's also that, right? That in combination with this AI emergence that is so disruptive and whose narratives are often very like inevitability focused.
Yes.
You have to get on board or you're going to get left behind.
Yes.
This is going to happen no matter what, and there's nothing you can do about it. It brings up a sense of existentialism, I think,
Yeah.
that can be very scary when there is so much tragedy happening in the world. It's very easy to succumb to that narrative and
Yeah.
feel like a loss of hope. Like, oh, well, maybe this is just how it is, and there's nothing in my power to do it. But I think that is the unique power of the social sector, because in
Mhm.
the face of every odd, we remain and we carry on
Yeah,
with our missions,
we
right?
do.
So like powering through that very deeply uncomfortable existential question of what does this mean? Will
Yeah.
this replace me? All of these things,
Oh,
they've come from a very real fear. And I just want to name that and acknowledge that. And it's not like it's very, very normal for us to be thinking about that, but that's also the reason to engage in these conversations and not withdraw, because community is the only way that we will persist.
I agree. I totally agree. I mean, so many deep, big questions and things to be thinking about, and sort of, I think you've given folks some good things to sort of noodle on as they're grappling with. I think I said before we started this, we're all like in our own little bubbles and spheres, and as we all know, generally all of us and have the most influence in our local community sphere, our families, your layers of spheres of influence, starting with yourself and your family. But we are all collectively also in this giant wave that nobody is in charge of. Like nobody is directing the
Right.
way. We are collectively directing where this goes. We all kind of don't know. Like you said, we're all kind of figuring it out. And even all the best engineers at OpenAI and Anthropic are stabbing around. I mean, that's their job. Right now is to just be like,
Yeah.
okay, what about this? What about that? Let's figure this out. Can we do
Professional
this?
experimenter.
I mean, which is like rad, but also it's again like the framing that they're using as they're thinking about that, and then it's our job to collectively think about impact. What's happening when those things get rolled out. I appreciate any of the big companies that I've seen, at least take a pause, take a breath, take a moment and say, hey, let's think about the bigger impact if we just release this at large. Hate to say it, humans, we don't have a great track record of being really the most awesome beings on the planet. Turns out there's a lot of things that come out that maybe aren't for the better of the greater good if we just unleash lots of things for folks. And that is a little bit of a sad note for me, where we can't just all be like, why isn't everybody just really looking out for the greater good? Well, that's just not, unfortunately, the way we're wired, I guess, on some level. Some of us are, some of us definitely are not. So there's like, we need to put in safeguards already, but it's definitely thinking
Hmm.
about right now you do have a lot of choice, and that's your power. That's your space of saying, great, how do I do this? I've been doing a lot of thinking, talking, trying to create these ideas of like responsible and sustainable and like the ethical
Yeah.
uses of these tools, and not just being like, jump in and like do all the things. And the idea that you said I want to just end on is the idea of like, don't just think about like, I've got this tool, now I need to use it and like in search of a problem. Like that's like
Hmm.
we want to reverse that out. And I would challenge everyone to think about all the work you can do outside of AI right now before you engage in the use of these tools, which is one of the most responsible things you can do in your use of the tools. If you're worried about the environmental impact or the ethical concerns, all these things, like, well, there's a ton you can do sort of in your own spaces. And if you're really super concerned, obviously you can create kind of your own little mini closed system if you need to, and still think about the ways in which this generative aspect has been created and the ways in which you can use it that are kind of just game changers, I'll say. I mean, it really is it's a mindset shift that I'm super excited about, that I think is going to transform kind of every aspect of the world, to be totally frank. But right now, it's not, there's no cement. It's very jello. It's like,
Mm.
it's not even jello. It's like,
I
what
think
it's,
that's a perfect description right
it's like
now.
before the jello even hardens, let alone cement. Like it's moving. And so we
It
have
is.
a, go ahead.
And even the people, right, who even the people who do know a lot about it don't know everything, right? Like you could find something new. You could learn something new that maybe 70% people working in the space don't know just by kind of playing around with the tool and exploring it. I think that, yeah, I would say that we are in a global phase of learning and
Mm-hmm.
discovery when it comes to this stuff. And the best possible thing that you could do is have more conversations about it and more conversations that provoke questions that are more specific and nuanced than
Mm-hmm.
is this right or wrong, right? Like what part of it? Why? In what
Mm-hmm.
in what case would this be really valuable? For
Right.
instance, I think a lot about AI when it comes to my own writing because my writing voice is very important.
Yeah.
And in a literature review I'm coming up with, I need to follow a certain structure,
Mm-hmm.
draw from different sources, right?
Mm.
Construct the argument, create, it
Right.
start and the end. That's very difficult for me. However, the phases that I went through in writing that paper, they started with literally writing on a piece of paper. And I know some
Mm-hmm.
people don't do this anymore, but writing things down on a piece of paper is my favorite thing in the world.
And it triggers different things in your brain, excuse me,
It
than
does.
like just typing or talking. So I'm also a huge fan. I have a
I
notebook.
love
I use
it.
it all the time. Paper and pen to me are huge. But keep going.
Our king. Yes, I
That's
totally agree.
hard.
So writing things down, brainstorming, whiteboards, a physical, I have a big whiteboard in my house for just this reason.
Me too.
Um, Thinking about what am I passionate about? How does the story of this thing flow? Just like
Mm-hmm.
writing a first pass, seeing where it goes, coming back to it a few days later, like what are the topics I want to dive in deeper on? Writing, just drafting some things see where my thoughts lead. Um, and then it was actually after a lot of that initial work that I fed the content of what I've written so far in all these disorienting kind of snippets into, I think, one of the providers, and I said, hey, listen, this is the structure that I need to follow.
Mm-hmm.
This is everything that I'm thinking about right now. How do these map together? How can I formulate my thought process to speak effectively to this structure, to these
Mm-hmm.
specific points in a way that is readable and comprehensible to somebody who is not me? And I felt great about that. Like, I
Yeah.
did not feel like I sacrificed any of my creative expression or voice in doing that
I love
because
that.
the problem wasn't I don't know how to write. The problem wasn't, oh, I need this thing to be written. The problem was I need to fit a structure that my brain isn't wired to
Hmm.
kind of come up with on its own. So
Yeah.
can we make those mappings or those connections? Um, but founded on, my own
But
thoughts.
keeping your originality in your like your human your originality in it, I think is a good one
Yeah.
too. Because I think there is a lot of fear around that. But that's a good sort of
And it's
example and process for folks, I think, to kind of go, oh, right. A lot of the pre-work that needs to happen before you engage in sort of some of these platforms sometimes, or why? Because you're trying to fit a
yeah.
specific structure or narrative outcome or blah, blah, blah. But you're not also just like, hey, go create this thing for me. And that's a huge difference. And I think that's where obviously we all try to caution the use of the platforms that I think is an ethical and responsible way to use it too. Like you're not just
Yeah.
like, hey, do this whole cloth creation for me, but help
Yeah.
me, which is what I do like for these episodes. This is all our original thinking, all of our talking, all of that, we're generating this content. And I'm like, help me sort of restructure this and surface some of the things out of what we already came up with. So there's original content, and then
Mm,
it's sort of like condense or surface things that you might not see, or it's a good sound, it's good at doing that. So that's where like I like to
yeah.
say there's good uses of it, and to me a good responsible ethical use of it versus just, hey, I need to write a creative story, will you go out into the world and generate one for me?
Yes.
Like,
I would love
no.
to say just one more thing on this
Yeah,
point
go
because
for
I love talking about it. Something that I personally have experienced with generative AI is having it write things for me.
it. Mm,
And and some of the guidance out there, they say, oh, generate whatever you need to, but then like review it and make sure that you sign off on what it's saying, its
right.
decisions, right? Like it's reviewed and you're on board with it. It can be very good at generating a lot of words and saying nothing.
Oh yes.
And it is really hard to identify that if you're not used to reading that kind of language. So I would write things or I would generate things with AI. And I'd say like, all right, this makes a lot of sense to me. I think I sign off on this. But later, if I would ask myself a question or somebody else asked me a question about like, all right, what did this part mean?
Hmm.
It's really hard to answer because I didn't come up with it initially, but that's not something that I ever would have imagined would have been difficult until I actually did it
It's
myself.
true. It's true.
And so it's even if, you know, the idea of content creation in general is very important to me
Yeah,
because, of course,
that's
we're
right.
an artist.
Yes.
But in addition to that, it's also a matter of like almost what are the words at face value
Yeah.
versus what do they truly mean?
Right.
And
These again, big
it's a
questions,
hard
big
thing to
things to think about. It is. You have to be like, so I think that these are the kinds of spaces that you get into that when you start using it more, you get past sort of the basic, like I call like your basic input output. Like, okay, I'm asking, I'm
yeah.
getting. You get into these deeper levels of use of the tools, which actually I think are kind of an interesting space again, which I think again when it first came out, people were like, "Oh, great, ask it, it's gonna give you these great answers," and then you get into deeper, more interesting uses
And
of
you
the
find the
platform.
limitation.
You do. Oh, you absolutely do, and I think that's a big one. And I think people, I think obviously kind of like I would say people are sort of 2 years in to this sort of like space effectively. Like it's been,
Mm.
but I think things again, just the rapid nature of the evolution is. I feel like I used to say like every 6 or 9 months. Now it feels like every 3 months or something. Like there's sort of like a new or something. And
Every
it's sort
day.
of every moment, every day. You're like, I can't. But it's just continuing to get in there because then you start to notice, and then you are increasing your sort of literacy in the space and using it more
Mm.
effectively, more thoughtfully, more. You're challenging it more. Like you're not just taking it at face value. I think that's the other piece you're kind of saying. Like you don't just
Hmm.
take what comes out. Everybody at this point, hopefully, is at that point. But even like go deeper and the deeper uses of the platform, I think, are just some of the interesting things. But yeah, lots of things, lots of big questions that are at play right now as we're kind of watching the Jello harden. I don't know what's happening. That's my analogy for the day. We're swimming in the Jello, and it hasn't solidified yet. Thankfully, we're still swimming around. We can still help
In the
the shape
gelatinous mass.
before the semi-gelatinous mass. That's what we're gonna call this. Like, you guys are crazy, but that's okay. It's not totally liquid, but it's not anywhere near like a Jello, and it's certainly not concrete. So
That's
my,
right.
final takeaways, our quick summary is like lots of big questions can and should be grappled with. Lots of the ideas of like, what does it mean to actually build trust in these spaces? I think it's a big one, and who and where you're sort of looking to create the trust. But also the big, I think, takeaway was the please social sector, like, get more involved in helping shape where the gelatinous mass, semi-gelatinous, whatnot, gets hardened. We want to be in those conversations, helping shape
Yeah.
what finally, and I don't know when we're going to get to anything that resembles even like a solid state, because it feels like
Hmm.
it's just like under that, we're on the Bunsen burner and it's still moving, like we're not moved off the stove yet where it gets solid. You're like, no, there's a lot, it's percolating, but
Yeah.
it still is moving in certain directions. So definitely the time is to get in and get involved and start helping put your voice in, because we don't want folks, there's been so much taking away of power and this sort of disenfranchisement that's happened in these technology spaces for so long. And I think right now, huge opportunities of democratization of access and shaping.
Hmm.
And I love that I'm here in this moment, being able to be involved in these conversations. And Abby, I just want to say thanks so much for your thoughts and for bringing some of these big topics into the Untangled show. Appreciate that.
Yes, of course. It was a delight to be here and talk about some of these things.
Yeah.
If I were to leave with one thing, it is I would encourage anyone listening to be so comfortable and so confident saying I don't know and asking more questions, because that is the single best thing that we can do right now. Have conversations with anyone about anything. Talk to
Yeah.
your people. Build that trust, build that connection, and build that community. Don't self-isolate.
Yeah. And don't let it be built for you. I think it's the big one right now. I'm like, get in, do it. So
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, Abby
Join
Lupi,
us.
Career Village. Get in here, people. Let's do this. Let's have the conversation. Next week on Untangled, I'm going to be joined by Ryan Bayerjon of Grass Riots, my Canadian friend of the North, and he is out there doing some of the building. So long time in the space and the sector, and he's building tools, and I love it, and I'm excited. He just came out with a platform, and we're going to talk about it. But we're going to do building tools for the Agentic Digital Fundraiser. So he's jumping in, he's owning it, the Agentic Digital Fundraiser. Lots of people can identify with in the social space. So I'm excited to see that. Check us out on Apple or Spotify if you're out there on those channels. And Abby, thank you again for being on Untangled. And everybody have a great rest of your Thursday. And we'll see you next time on Untangled.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.